One of the things that Indiana has kind of been struggling with is about 10 years ago, we decided to go from slip-in spreaders to live floors, which doesn't really seem like that big of an issue until you start looking at what that does to the back of the truck. Because we have free drop down to our spinners, and what we started finding is salt's incredibly abrasive when you hit it on a spinner constantly on the back of a truck. So after even one winter, all the different undercoatings that we actually tried were eroding away. So the whole back hitch plate, the whole back suspension, really just started rusting really, really bad after the first winter. And as you know, after the first winter, if you're seeing rust by year 5, 6, 8, 15, there's not going to be a lot left back there. So we tried different products. We've tried some of our Z-Bart products, Line-X products. We've tried some of the more creative rattle can versions. And we've had generally about the same results, as they all kind of erode after one or two winters. So they don't really get us anywhere to like a midlife rebuild point where we can conveniently bring it in, blast it, and recoat it. So we kind of got to thinking, are we doing this wrong? Are we looking at this from the wrong direction? So we started looking out and seeing what other people do. We're not the only ones that fight coating issues. We're not the only ones that fight abrasion. I mean, you've got water towers out there. You've got treatment facilities. You've got all kinds of major industrial tanks and processes that don't get coated every year. So we started asking around, trying to figure out if maybe we're doing something wrong. We're calling something wrong in the spec. We're asking for maybe the wrong product. And so what we did is we've actually got a QPA with Porter Paint Group. We brought them in, they're architectural and industrial folks, and just said, this is our problem. The back of these trucks are literally starting to rot. On our old single channels, it wasn't much of an issue, but now we've got double channel. So there's a lot of concern that as we go to 15 years, we're going to start having creep and we're going to actually start jacking the rails apart. There's been some beverage companies in Indiana that have already had this issue. So right now I've got about 200 trucks with a double rail. So you figure $150,000 a truck, that's a whole lot of money. I can't afford to go and replace those trucks. So when Porter came in, their first question was, okay, you're really no different than, a water tower or a pickling, plant somewhere that's running steel. So what do you do to that steel when you first get it in from your distributor? Well, we went to the distributors and said, what are you just even giving us? What base coat treatment are you doing to this metal? And come to find out, that's actually a lot harder question to answer than you would think. Right now we're running Freightliner, so not to pick on Freightliner, but we kind of got a very generic answer back as far as what they were doing. They just said, well, we process our frame rail and we E-dip it. Well, there's a lot of variations that you can do to treatment to even E-dip that. So we're still trying to figure out just what they're giving us so we can change our specs appropriately. Then the next question was, okay, that's fine. You can coat it. That's great. You're doing something to the base metal, but are you taking a layered defense? Their thought is, well, you want to have a good base coat, good primer coat, good mid coat, and good top coat. If for those of you that have done auto refinishing or ever painted, I guess that's pretty much the industry standard, if you actually do car panels or anything like that. So we kind of looked at them and go, well, no, not really. We shotgun it black at the factory, and then we take it down to Z-Bart, and they top coat it with some kind of polyurethane top coat. So we've actually come up with a new process. We're going to try it on some trucks this year. We're going to actually go back and try to see if we can get some trucks from last year cleaned up and redid, where we do that, where we actually go back in, we put a primer coat, back that up. There's a sealer coat, and I forget the name of it. It was on one of my slides, but it's a penetrating sealer that dries hard that you can paint on top of. They said you've really got to do that first because that wicks into all the little channels that you can't get to with a primer coat. So they said build it up, seal it, and then layer it, and then if you want to go back in with the Z-Bart on a top coat, they said that's going to give you your wear defense. So that way if you do need to come back in, grind it down and fix it, you've actually got multiple layers to keep rust from running underneath you. Because that was the other problem we were seeing is there were areas of the top coat looked fine. The rust was running underneath because we weren't actually having properly adhered layers. So we do have that. We're actually getting ready to pilot that here this summer. So hopefully next year for the Midwest group when we meet, we'll have some pictures of actually what we did. We're really looking for some good results out of this because like I said, 200 trucks, that's a fifth of my fleet. There's no way I can replace that anytime soon. So I've got to find a way to live with them for 15 years. So any questions as far as that go? I do have one other small topic I promised somebody I'd touch on real quick. Why, either was that long of a night at the zoo, or? All right. The other topic I wanted to touch on real quick is something that we've heard kind of a little bit about here from everybody else, is mechanic retention, mechanic training, and just how do we sustain our workforce. We've actually got all of our deputy commissioners to agree on something, which in and of itself was kind of a major accomplishment. But they said we really do need to study why we lose people. Why do we have turnover? Why do we have low morale? And one of the things we've started realizing is we just don't do a good job training. Because we've done some internal self-assessments, and one of the really big things we found is even our shop foremen, when asked, they don't know how to work on diesel engines. And that really took a lot of people for surprise, because they grew up, they've been here 20, 30 years back when we had gasoline engines. So when they got hired on as mechanics, we had spark-initiated engines. So now everything's gone to diesel, they don't have that knowledge set. And everything now is computerized, so a lot of our middle-aged and older workforce has no experience working on computerized trucks. So we've realized we've got a pretty big gap analysis we had to do. For those of you that are kind of familiar with any ISOs, be it 9000s or 14000s, you realize you kind of have to go undergo, what do we need, what do we have, and how do we get that gap closed? So we're actually in the middle of that. We've got that pretty well down. We're actually looking to contract and get some pricing down to actually bring in that. So one of the things, that's actually one of the emails that went around, was how do you keep people, how do you certify people, and how do you keep that workforce? So a lot of the things we looked at is, ASE certifications. We don't want to do that because they leave. We can't do internal certifications because our lawyers wouldn't let us. So if we can't do external, we can't do internal, where does that put us? So right now we're just thinking continuous improvement, online training, standardize the training program, so that way the guy that does the oil change actually knows how to do an oil change. Because we've even gone out and interviewed mechanics, and mechanic to mechanic, it's amazing the variation when you ask the guy to do a PM on a car or even a truck, the variation of service you get. So that's one of the things I'd recommend, is when you go back, just ask your mechanics, just back to back, how do you do it and how do you do it? And I guarantee you'll get two completely different answers. So that is one of the things that we've actually initiated, and I actually did have a little bit on that, just standardizing that platform on what is a PM, so that way on-the-job training becomes standard. So with that, any questions, either on the training or the undercoating?